Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pro Wrestling Inside. Now, me and Jack were talking amongst each other, basically talking about Facebook and how we started. That nobody, not one solitary person was following, and we did maybe 20 or 30 posts, and maybe 10 people saw them. And today, we have millions of people who come to the site. Last 28 days, 5.2 million unique account holders came to the page to see something about it. So we do appreciate that.
And I don't remember our date, but we closed on 4 years this month.
Yeah, and I think it was 2019, maybe March or April 2019 or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think we started doing the actual show until a year later. I think it was a year later, maybe. I don't really know. I've slept since then. Let's talk a little bit. Rodney will be with us in a minute. He was having some difficulties with his microphone. I was too. So somewhere around Cleveland, Tennessee area, somebody came in and started breaking up phones. So, microphones, that is. Jack, let's talk about, we lost Ole Anderson. I guess it was the 26th, right? Early the 26th, maybe the 25th, somewhere around there.
Yesterday morning. So.
There's not going to be a funeral, I don't think, for Ole. I think they do have a place where you can go and I think do your condolences online. I noticed that. But Ole was, a lot of people, I think, misunderstood Ole a lot of times because, you'll say, well, he was gruff and he was mean. But Ole was the type of guy that he would tell you exactly what was on his mind. And you didn't ask him, well, hey, how was my match? Because he was going to tell you what your match was like. Ole had a great career, and when you look back at it, I have to say the first time that I remember seeing Ole, it was Ole and Gene Anderson against Wrestling 1 and 2, and I remember the emotion that was inside that arena, and I'm pretty sure it was at the Atlanta City Auditorium where this was at, because I always thought maybe it was at the Sports Arena, but I don't think they ran the Sports Arena too often. After we would start coming to wrestling matches, and I would remember. I just don't think they ran the sports arena. But I remember, though, as a kid, the emotion that the people had when Ole and Gene came out to the place, and Rodney has joined us. It was as a kid, it was a resounding boo that shook the arena. Wrestling fans today would probably not even understand that type of reaction that Ole and Gene got. They walked to the ring, got in the ring, and it was funny because the boos would start from where the people could see you. And they got steadily, as they walked to the ring, they steadily got bigger. And then Wrestling 1 and 2 came out. And the same thing happened. It steadily got bigger and bigger. And when they stepped in the ring, the people went nuts. But I can remember the emotion in that match because they would grab a hold of Wrestling 2's mask. And I noticed it was usually Wrestling 2. It wasn't Wrestling 1 they went the mask after. It was mostly Wrestling 2. And I can remember them pulling that mask and it going that far, from the thing. Ole and Gene, they were a special kind of tag team. And Ole knew how to control the fans. And I thought about it today, and none of those people that were within that match is with us anymore. And it's a sad thing because so many of the greats of that era are passing away, and really, most didn't even get to take that knowledge and show it to someone else, and that's a sad thing of this. Rodney, let's talk a little bit about Ole Anderson. Let's see if your mic is working.
Testing 1 2 testing.
Well, it's working. It's working as good as it's probably going to work tonight. So, hey, people, turn up your Turn up your volume there.
Sorry about that. I'll do it. You continue just a second, and I'll
Jack,
try
what
to
is your
get
first
there.
memories of Ole Anderson?
Well, of course, watching him on TV for a while, I remember though that specific time when he and I don't remember who all else it was, but they jumped Tommy Rich in the ring and cut his hair.
Yes.
Now I had already started being in and around the business and doing stuff. I knew what the business was. But I remember sitting on the edge of my couch yelling like my grandpa used to do at Tojo Yamamoto. But I was so into that. They made me forget everything else, man. I was focused on that. And I remember how Tommy went around to the towns for weeks after with his hair chopped up. And, but that was just, I mean, that was legit heat. We have talked so many times about Tommy and wrestling too. And of course, there was no music back then. But as soon as fans saw them come into the ring, that that roar built, and it wasn't clapping. I mean, it was a roar.
Yes.
And but on the opposite side of the scale, guys like Ole, Superstar, Ivan Koloff, when they came out of their dressing rooms, the boos were deafening because they created that hatred in that crowd. People wanted to hate them, and here's a lesson for all you guys out there today: they made their best money by making people hate them. You
Yes.
know, and that is how people don't understand how important that is mind boggling. But Ole was the best. I
You
really
know,
really did.
we when I look at the and I looked at when he went against Ole and Gene went against there, but there was also a time when he went against Thunderbolt Patterson. Uh, we went to the Omni, and this would have probably been somewhere around 76, I believe. I believe it's 76, 77. Ole Anderson, Thunderbolt Patterson inside a steel cage in the Omni in Atlanta. You couldn't even get out of your seat because if you did, you would lose your seat. They oversold the Omni. So many people to go see this match. Uh, Thunderbolt again was a person who could get the people behind him, and him and Ole just had some chemistry. And think about it, they had such chemistry that even from 1976, 77, in 1990, Thunderbolt Patterson still came to Atlanta, Georgia, as part when Ole was redid the Four Horsemen, and it still drew money with Thunderbolt Patterson with Ole Anderson because it had some type of emotion attached to it. But look at the people that Ole wrestled against. Jumping Dusty Rhodes in the parking lot, him and Ivan Koloff was a brilliant move, and it just showed that Ole always had something cooking. You knew when Ole Anderson was going to be there. You knew that number one, the match was going to be good. You also knew that there's a possibility he's going to cheat, but you wanted to figure out which way he was going to cheat that night to win the match. What was he going to do? Because he always had some kind of plan cooking to see exactly what could. And it was so good because when he turned on Dusty inside the cage, another tremendous. In the interview, if you've not seen the interview is tremendous. What he says, he said, I didn't even have to ask Dusty Rhodes. He said, let's put it in a cage. And the interview was magnificent. Rodney, are you good to go now?
I'm not sure. Am I
Yeah,
good to
I
go?
think
Is it
you
still
are.
low?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
good.
still low, but
Uh, we're talking about a once in a lifetime wrestler. There really was not anybody doing what Ole Anderson's doing, or he and Gene. As you know, when we did the top teams, top tag teams, Ole and Gene Anderson was my number one team, and there's a reason for that. They did wrestling. They did as a tag team like no other. They And it's because we'll be seeing it with our wrestling coming up about how the rules set the pace of the show. And the Andersons were able, with the 5 count, to be able to block. And I remember this block that they would do. Nobody else has done it. Dennis Condrey and Dennis Condrey came close to it, but this block that they would do to keep the guy in their corner, they would hold their hands up, but they would block the guy from trying to make the tag, and Gene would come in and they would keep him in that corner. Uh, just a tremendous team, and if anybody, there's also a great video of Thunderbolt Patterson and Bill Watts against Ole and Gene Anderson. Think about it. Who else did you ever see Ole bump for more than Thunderbolt Patterson? You're not going to see it because Ole knew there was money with Thunderbolt. Ole knew there was money with Wrestling 2. Ole knew there was money with Dusty Rhodes, and he would put them over, but they also put him over when the time came. Um, Again, he didn't care whether you liked him or not. He didn't care if any of the boys liked him or not. He was there for one reason, and I remember Big Nose Dave Meltzer. He was having that interview with this moron, and he had to educate Big Nose about the wrestling business. Okay, you're in the and for those of you who do not know, I'm going to let you in for a secret. And Ole would tell you this: you're in the wrestling business to make money. And if you didn't draw a house, you can work with a guy. You're not. It's not going to be good. It's no need to get in the ring. It's no need to go to the towns. I think him and Big Nose Meltzer, who has his nose stuck in everybody's business because he has no choice. I think that he said something about, oh, well, you never went to Madison Square Garden. He said, why would I go to Madison Square Garden when I can make just as much as Greenville, Charlotte, and Atlanta than I would
Exactly.
doing there? So there is a definite difference between a lot of wrestlers today and Ole. Ole did it primarily because he wanted to make money. All right, and whatever it took to make the money, it didn't bother him to have to do it. One of the most I don't remember who they were working against, and it might have been Bill Watts and Thunderbolt Patterson. And I think I've discussed it before on the program, where Ole slammed, I believe it was Bill Watts' head into Gene. Gene was coming into the ring, and Ole slammed him into his own brother, knocking him out. And then Gene was gone. Gene was gone for a couple of weeks. And Ole was standing out there, and he said, we will do whatever is necessary. You injured your own brother. We won, didn't we? We won. And it was just, to me, I'm glad that I grew up when I did. I'm glad that we came up when we did, because if not, we wouldn't have seen the greatness of Ole Anderson and Wrestling 2 and Dick Slater. I was thinking about it today uh, after I heard, and there was a story this week saying that tag team wrestling is dead. And I just had to control myself from reaching through and strangling that imbecile. Just because Vince McMahon never liked tag team wrestling, never thought that it was worth anything, doesn't mean that it didn't draw. And the fact of the matter is, if you had a team like Ole and Gene today, where you pushed them and you put them against the top people in the territory, it's going to draw people. That's the way it was. You think about it. Ole and Gene went against every top guy that they were, because the Andersons as a team was no better.
Yep.
We're no better a team. So when the Andersons could go against Tommy Rich and Wrestling 2, or Tommy Rich and Tony Atlas or Wrestling 1 and 2, they could change that card up however they want to, and it's always going to be a draw. There's not many times, there are not many teams you could do with that with. The only other team, I think, Midnight Express, when they were in Mid South, they had it fixed perfectly, booked perfectly, where they could take that card and mix it up however you want and come out with a house. And that's what it. And we saw that, I think, twice in Georgia, where they could mix that talent up however you want, and you're going to draw a house. Ole could be on the main event and Macon against Wrestling 2 for the Macon Championship. I went through all of his matches, a lot of his matches today, and I was primarily focusing on 78, where the parking lot incident took place, to see if they had listed. for whatever reason in that database, they did not list the match between Bill Watts and Dusty Rhodes against Ole Anderson and Ivan Koloff for the Omni, which was a sellout, and people were sitting on the steps that year. Same as when Thunderbolt against Ole and that was the $1,000 versus the Georgia TV Championship. It was in a cage, and Thunderbolt Patterson beat him right in the middle.
When people talk about Ole, and you have a lot of wrestlers that, because they have talked about him in such a negative way, people believe that Ole was a negative. He was the boss, and that's the reason that they talk about him in a negative way. Ole, on purpose, did not make you a friend when he worked for you. When you worked for him, he did not talk to you. He did not treat you any different than anyone else. Everyone was treated equally, because when he wanted to get rid of you, because it was his job on the line, if for some reason you weren't drawing money, he certainly didn't want to be going eating with you at Waffle House in the mornings, and becoming your friend, and then you have to go, well, man, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to get rid of it. That happened in a lot of territories. A lot of bookers, Jack, you know that happened, and Ole made sure to distance himself from the talent. And you understand that. You've took care of a talent. You have to distance yourself, and that's what Ole did. Your comments on that?
I talked with Bill Eadie several years back, and I asked him how his relationship was with Ole when he worked for him, and he said, "Hey, we were fine." He said, "Because I knew to do what he told me to do, and I didn't complain about what he told me to do. And I was able to make money under him." And he said, I think the real reason, though, is he said, "I was not blind with ego. When I saw that my value was dropping, I would tell Ole, hey, it's time for me to go somewhere else for a while." And he said, I would go to Japan, or I would go to New York, or, wherever. He said, and then a year, maybe less, he said, I'd come back, and he said, I'd be rejuvenated all over again. He said, if everybody would have really understood that aspect of the business back then, he said, there wouldn't be any stories of, oh, Ole was mean to me.
Stan Hansen never had a problem.
Nope.
With Ole Anderson. A lot of people never, they'll say, well, Tommy Rich will say it, but to my knowledge, I don't think he had a huge problem with Tommy Rich.
No.
And I don't think Tommy Rich had a huge problem with him. It sounds good to say, oh, I had problems with him, because everybody else said they had problems with him. Our father, Ron West, did not have a problem with Ole Anderson. Yeah. He just did. They worked well together from 1970. What year did Ole start booking? 1976, right after Gary Hart?
Yes, I think that's right.
So sometime in 1976 until, yes, Ole did fire him. But I don't think Ole, because years later Ole said, I don't really know why I fired you. And Dad said, I think I know why. Because the powers to be wanted to do those jobs, and they didn't want to pay me and Les Thatcher because they fired both of them the same day. I don't think it had anything to do with anything. I think it just, they need they want that money that's being paid out. And I think at the time, both guys were making good weekly amount of money. Not what Ole says in his book, because I remember Dad telling Ole, he says, you owe me a lot of money if that's what you were paying me. But Ole understood. He understood wrestling. I'm not going to say that Ole understood the business as a whole, but when it came to wrestling and what happened inside the ring, Ole understood that. And Ole understood believability was the major aspect of making wrestling work and making someone buy a ticket. Anytime you watched Ole Anderson, I don't think there was probably a time you ever watched Ole Anderson and you said these words, well, that wasn't real. Mm-mm. I don't think those words would have came out of your mouth.
I think you thought at one point, I'm thinking, Ole might be losing it. I mean, losing a step in the wrestling business. And I remember when he came back from the Carolinas, and this was right before the switch over, and he did that angle with Tony Atlas, the fight. Anybody, and I was thinking, no, no, Ole's not lost a step. That was so believable. It was rough. It looked like it was rough on Tony Atlas. Uh, it was a believable. It was a believable fight between Ole and it just showed and proved right then that no matter what time, Ole was always on top of his game when it comes to that. And it was amazing. If you haven't had a chance to see that, it's readily available. It's Ole Anderson, Tony Atlas on television. It starts off with a match, and they were going at it. The match was going at it. It ended up with a pull apart, and it was quite great. It was really good stuff.
Dad would always, people said that, and there was times that Dad and Ole did not get along a lot of times because based on stuff. He would come up with ideals, and Ole would cuss him. He did. He would cuss him and say, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. You get out of here with all that Tennessee bull, and Dad would leave. Well, the next day he said, Ronnie, come here. Let's talk a little bit. You know that thing we were talking about yesterday? I was thinking about that. And that's how Ole was. But that was Ole. Ole was never mean to me and Rodney. Never. Now, if he told us to leave, if he told us to get out, or he told us, well, guess what? We'd get out. Right. If he told us to leave the room, we'd leave the room. Because he was the boss. And I think that people don't understand that. People say, well, they didn't like Bill Watson. Well, he was the boss. You never like the boss. The boss is always the bad guy. And that's what Ole Anderson was. He was the bad guy. But look at the people that he gave opportunities to. I don't think they would be Road Warriors if it wasn't for Ole Anderson. Buzz Sawyer would have never got the push that he got. Even though Dad started it in Chattanooga, he took it, put it on TBS, and made Buzz Sawyer a name in the wrestling business. The same thing goes with so many people that he actually made into stars. He made Tommy Rich into a star. He never was a star when he was in Memphis. He certainly wasn't a star when he went back to Memphis. But when he came back and someone knew what to do with Tommy Rich, and Ole did, Ole got him over. And he knew what to do to get him over. He beat him, and he said, it's about the selling. And it was about the emotional connection. Ole understood. It was about the emotional connection. And the two people or the four people wrestling each other that made wrestling what it is. And that's a lost art today because they don't understand. It's not about the moves. It's not about all that. It's about the two guys and that rival that they have. Ole Anderson, Dusty Rhodes drew money. Ole Anderson, Tommy Rich drew money. Ole Anderson, Thunderbolt Patterson drew money. Ole Anderson, Wrestling 2 drew money. Anybody that Ole Anderson wrestled against in Georgia drew nothing but money. And so you have to give it to Ole. Now, somebody said, well, he made about $250,000. He probably did a year when he was booking Atlanta and Charlotte.
Yep.
And working the top.
Yeah.
Get the main event payoff at the same time.
I mean, Ole wasn't going to go to the spot shows. And for those people, spot shows is the little small towns that hold about 300 or 400 people, or the high school gyms or fundraisers. Ole wasn't going there. I was surprised one day that he showed up in Cartersville, Georgia. It was the main event was going to be Ole and Ivan Koloff against Chief Wild McDaniels and Tommy Rich. I remember saying, is the place going to be big enough for that? I mean, they were selling out the Atlanta City Auditorium. They were selling out Columbus, Georgia with that. You're going to go to Cartersville, Georgia, a little gym. And it was packed.
This was in the stadium.
That's right. It was at the stadium.
It was in the stadium. The stadium was packed. And then we came back with Wahoo and Tommy Rich against Bobby Heenan's Bounty Hunters and died an untimely death.
I don't think people realize, Jack, how important Ole Anderson was to professional wrestling. A lot of people don't think he had even Ric Flair said in a post, we might have never agreed with each other, but I understood you made Ric Flair. He even gave him credit, him and Gene. You let me be a cousin of the Andersons, and you made Ric Flair. Ole was a very important part of the wrestling business. A lot of people say, well, he didn't have a lot of. Ole Anderson had a ton of power in pro wrestling in the 1970s and the early 80s. He just had that power, and made a ton of money for a lot of people. Do you want to see what the insiders have got to say? A lot of people on here.
Let me say this before we move on to that. I was reading, you know how on Facebook they recommend sites to you, and it was about Ole, and I thought, well, let me just scroll down through here because there wasn't a lot of comments. If there's 500 comments, I'm not looking, but it's just a few. And I looked down there, and this guy said, he said there was some house show, and I forgot where it was, somewhere up north. He said it was poorly advertised by WCW. It's right, Ole was still the guy. And he said, but it drew really well. And he said, I'm 13 years old. And he said, I'm watching all these big superstars that I see on TV. And he said, and I turn around and I see Ole standing outside the dressing room watching the matches. He said, so I'm 13. I got no fear in life. He said, so I make my way right back there to him. And he said, I start talking his ear off. And he said Ole was, pretty gruff, but he didn't tell him to leave or nothing, and the kid, he just wanted an autograph. And Ole told him, he said, I tell you what, he said, if you leave me alone and go back to your seat, he said, I will be out here as soon as my match is over with, because Ole was mad. He said, I'm going to be standing right here. He said, after my match, you come back here, I'll give you an autograph. So he said, I went. And he said, matches was over. He went back to the dressing room, and he never came out. And he said, I think Ray Apollo was on the show, and he said, so I knew Ray, and I looked in the dressing room, I saw Ray, I waved my hand, and, Ray, because, the show was over. He walked, he said, Ray had him in. I told him what I was wanting. And he said, well, yeah, let me take you to Ole. And he said, we go over there. Ole's half naked, trying to get dressed. And Ray says, this boy wants your autograph. He said he was going to give it, or you were going to give it to him. And said Ole just went on this cussing fit. Why are you letting a kid in the dressing room? And he said, I took off running. He said, I was scared he was going to whoop my butt. And he said, I never got that autograph, but he said, I'm going to tell you what, it was the greatest wrestling experience of my entire life.
Ole was Ole, and I can't say he was to me he was one of the greatest wrestlers. And his tag team, Ole and Gene, they're the top tag team ever in pro wrestling.
Absolutely.
And, let's see who is on here. Richard Hood is with us. How you doing, Richard? Kurt Searcy, good evening, guys. Rest in peace, Ole Anderson. Richard Hood, also rest in peace, Ole. Dandra Sam Washington, good evening. Let's see. Dandra said, rest in peace, Ole. Kevin, huh?
That's Dondre.
Oh, Dondre. I see that now. Dondre, sorry. I'm going to have to get a bigger screen, folks. My computer messed up, so now I have a newer computer, but the screen is so small. The other one was huge, so it's not good when you're.
Well, you didn't read that.
Oh, wait a minute.
He had a good statement there.
All right, Kevin Penley. I was a fan of Ole. He made stars. Ole and Gene set the standard for tag team wrestling in Mid-Atlantic. He was right about the WWF and WWE.
Yep.
He certainly was right about Vince McMahon. He never liked Vince McMahon. Let's see. Ole was the best heel in the business. I agree with that. I'll put him up there as the top. Because he was a true heel. Let's see. Kevin Barkwell was only the booker of the feud between Wrestling 2 and Dick Slater, or was it Ron West? It was Ole.
Yes.
It was Ole. Now he would send Dad back then. He would send Dad with Wrestling 2 to a town, talk to him about what they angles and the stuff they wanted to do, and then maybe 2 days later he would ride with Dick Slater to the towns and talk to them about it, and then come back, talk to Wrestling 2. There was a lot of discussions back then in the cars. That's when a lot of the booking was done in the cars. Augusta, Georgia was a town, and a lot of times that Ole and Dad would ride together, and they would come up with stuff. And he said, "Well, you go get with Johnny and make sure he's all right with that. You know, Johnny." and he would ride with them to Macon. Our father would ride with them to Macon and say, "This is what we want to do," and he may want to tweak it. And then he would go back to Ole and say, "Well, this is what he wanted to do. Well, go see what Dick Slater wants to do." And that's how they did it back then. And that's the reason it was so good. But Ole is the one that came up with the Ole and with the Dick Slater Wrestling 2. Let's see. Out of the ring in the dressing room 4 times on Sunday. Let's see. How did they pursue Jack to return to the ring?
Well, it was an opportunity. My fiance was my manager 20-something years ago. And the one thing that I always regretted was those last matches that I had, knowing that they were my last ones, it just wasn't a thing that we could do to, for her to manage me out there. And so I always wanted to do it. This opportunity came up, and I thought, well, this gives us one last chance, so. It didn't take a whole lot of persuading per se, but now again, to do it again, it may take a lot. Just according to how fast they get me to the hospital.
Let's see. Ole had a gun pulled on one time by one of the talent. That's really and I think Blackjack Mulligan knocked him out like 2 or 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
But he just, what's so funny? One time you'd think we'd be enough, but Ole just come back again, just get knocked out again. He's just like he didn't care. Yeah, and I think Ole could hold his own, but there's some people he couldn't hold his own. And I don't think Blackjack Mulligan was one of them you could hold your own with. There's a couple of guys that's. And I don't think Ole wanted to deal with Scott Irwin. I don't think he would have fought him.
That is how business was handled in the dressing rooms back then. You get knocked out or you have a fair fight and you both still stand, whatever, but it was over with.
But I don't think it was about anything he did wrestling-wise. I think he had said something about somebody who had passed away, about some family member that had passed away, and Ole made some, the Ole way.
He had a very dark sense of humor.
Yes, he did. And he made that he thought might have been funny. It wasn't funny to that person, and they pulled a gun up. But I don't think it had anything to do with any type of thing that happened inside the wrestling ring.
I mean, we can all agree that Ole would not survive in today's cancel culture. Or maybe he would meet up with everybody that says anything and whoop them.
This is true. Let's see. Ole wrestled for Nick Goulas in Birmingham once against Rufus R. Jones, and it lasted like 30 seconds from Kevin Penley.
My understanding is that Ole worked in Birmingham multiple times.
Yeah, I know they told a story one time, and Dad told a story. He says, we went to Birmingham. He said, me and Ole, we drive to Birmingham, and he said, I'm going to referee their matches. I don't think Ole wanted just anybody. So he said they're there, and Dad says, hey, Dad asked, Ole asked Dad, hey, did you get your payoff? He said, yeah, man, wasn't that good. And he said, well, how much was it? He said, well, just give me just a minute. He said, the next thing you know, Ole brings him some more money and says, there you go, I took care of that for you. I can imagine that conversation between Ole and Nick Goulas. I just see that conversation. I'm guarantee you, Nick Goulas was sitting on the floor shaking, but
I'm sure it was a one-sided discussion.
pretty sure it was. But see, at the time, it was funny because Jim Barnett helped Nick Gulas. During that 1977, 78, 79 period, uh, Jim Barnett went out of his way to send talent to Birmingham, to Chattanooga to help Nick. Uh, why? I don't know, because at the same time they were sending people to Jerry Jarrett too. So I'm kind of wondering sometimes if that wasn't all work. Not for sure. Donnie Hester, hello everyone. Ole knew how to put butts in seats. He was a great booker. We all agree with that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I put him as one of the top bookers of all time.
Everything I do as a booker is what I learned from watching Ole and listening to Ron. Those are the anybody else to me. I mean, there were some great ones out there, but those fit my vision of what wrestling should be. And to this day, that's still the formula that we follow.
Yeah. Richard Hood said they would stay on one body part. Ole and Gene would, and Ole and Ivan would do the same thing. Now, I didn't see a lot of Ole and Arn. Did they do that same thing? Did they stay with the body part?
They went to the arm. They went right for the arm. And that was where you saw the body slam on the arm. They would take what it was, a hammer.
And if there was any big bump spots, then that arm was taking those.
Yeah, at that point anyway. Yeah. Kevin Pinley, Ole really tried to help Buzz Sawyer, and he did.
Yep.
He loved Buzz Sawyer. He really did. He liked him. But I think Ole saw that Buzz Sawyer was a real athlete. Buzz was very good at what he did. Now, you got to give, he was messed up a lot and, stomping on peanuts, going down the Memorial Auditorium in Chattanooga and cussing them and stuff. But there was no better. And when he was on, there was no better than Buzz Sawyer inside the ring. He was fluid in what he did. It was so smooth. Daniel Lang, let me see if I can throw this up. WTC tribute to Ole Anderson. His first taste of go was the AWA Midwest Heavyweight Championship. Who did he defeat for the title? Oh, this is trivia. Okay. Johnny Valentine, number 8. Bob Orton Sr., Dr. Jerry Graham, or Frizz Von Erich. Let people figure that out, and we'll get back to that. Johnny Valentine, Bob Orton Sr., Dr. Jerry Graham, Frizz Von Erich. Hey, and people don't try to cheat there and go online. Because I thought about myself. I'm not going to do that. Donnie Hester. The Anderson block was impressive. You know who else did that for a while? Was the Dirty White Boys. They started doing the little block in their matches. So, Mickey Mayfield, Ole was the best.
Lynn didn't wrestle a lot like Ole.
Yeah.
He did.
Let's see. Ole was the best bad guy in Georgia. Yes. Followed by, I think, personally myself, the Masked Superstar. Thought he was. I think he was good. Richard Hood said he was Alan the Rock Rogowski. Robert Rogowski back then. He didn't stay there long. He went from there. He wasn't too long after he started. He ends up in Carolinas. The Minnesota Wrecking Crew, one of the best. Richard Hood, one of the best tag teams of all time.
Absolutely.
Does anyone have any footage of Ole in the AWA? I've never seen any.
I've never seen it.
But I would love to see the footage of when he told the story of he seen a little guy. He didn't know who he was. And he said, I'll take that guy right there because I think I can beat him. And the guy got him in the ring and just whipped him and grabbed a hold of him and hurt him bad. And he said, man, who was that guy? And they said, well, it's Danny Hodge.
I remember that story.
That was Danny Hodge that you just got in the ring with. He said, I have never been beat up so bad that I got beat up by Danny Hodge. Danny Hodge, he evidently had the strength in his hands, unlike anyone else ever. He actually went in Oklahoma, he went into some court and he showed him breaking all kinds of stuff. And I think that's when they ended up having some kind of Danny Hodge award in Oklahoma. And I'm not for sure what that would have been, but
it was for amateur wrestling.
Oh, is that what it was for?
Yeah, because he was huge in amateur wrestling before he ever turned pro.
Evidently, he was something else. Him and another guy came about at the same time, and I can't remember that guy's name right now. I don't think he was as good as Danny Hodge, but he must have been a real shooter as well. Let's see, Kevin Penley. Since Roddy is going to wrestle the Bear, how do you do a promo on the Bear? It got to be better than most of the guys today.
Well, I'll just say Rodney will do a lot better promo on the Bear than the Bear will on him.
I listen to interviews and stuff today. A lot of that stuff they say on some of the interviews back in the 70s. There's no way they get away with that today. I hope Ole is at peace. I hope he is too, Dennis. He did have some. His last years were not even when we used him years ago, and I can't even. That was years ago now. I think it was 1998. Ole was in. It might have been 2006 when we used him, but he was in bad shape then. Still had his mind though.
Yeah, that was the day we got to spend the whole day with him.
Yeah, just a great guy. That was from Dennis Mitchell. I hope Ole's at peace. Daniel Lang. Rodney, did you see when Ole teamed with Ray Stevens and slammed their opponents head into Ray's? It started a feud between them.
I did not see that. Where was that, Daniel?
I believe that was in the Carolinas. Yes, I did see that. Ray did not, and I remember him saying, he said, well, we do that. Look, I've done that to Gene many times. What's wrong with you? You think you're better than Gene is? And Ray said, well, I didn't tell you to do that to me. He said, well, did we win? It was good. I'm pretty sure it was Mid-Atlantic. Is either, because they did 2 or 3 shows, didn't they? Mid-Atlantic Wrestling?
Yes.
Didn't they do like 2 or 3 shows? Worldwide, Mid-Atlantic, and maybe another one?
Even the Briscoe brothers copied that finish against Youngblood and Steamboat when they won the tag belts off them.
Boy, the Briscoes was good as bad guys there. I thought they were so good.
I thought they were really good as babyfaces, but they were magnificent as heels.
They were. Ole was Southeast Heavyweight Champion at one time and challenged Harley Race for the NWA title out in Southeastern. I'm going to tell you something, though. We were there one night, and we were and I don't know, but there was a referee there. And Ole was going against, do you remember who he wrestled that night? Was it Killer Carl Cox?
Yes, this video is on YouTube as well.
And he beats up the referee. And I don't even know, did the referee there before?
No, that was the first time I've seen him. But the referee screwed him over in the match.
Yeah.
And then Ole takes him completely out. Now, Ole's gone. Ole's gone the next week because on Southeastern, the TV the next day or whatever they did the TV, Stan Hansen was there and he was doing the talking and he was going to be going against Cox. And Ole and Stan Hansen was saying that this referee was getting exactly what he deserved right here. And he and Cox got into it and they had a fight and brawl out there.
It never did draw. Unfortunately, Georgia never really drew big houses in Knoxville because the night he beats up but they had a lot of people didn't show up that was supposed to be there. I remember Dusty Rose didn't show up one time that he was supposed to be on the card and somebody else took a spot and I can't think maybe Tony Atlas took a spot. But the night he beats up that referee, the crowd was really, really bad that night. I remember me and Rodney sitting in the audience saying, well, who in the world was that referee? He just
We
beat it.
never saw him before, and
Yeah.
he did some very bad punches. I'll tell you right now, his punches wasn't any good.
But
Maybe that's the reason only hurt him real bad.
all his punches was good. I think that guy had no other choice but to sell that. That was all right. Ole was making $250,000 back in the '70s, being a booker and in-ring talent, and I could see it because he was getting that 2.5%, 3% of the booking and main event payoff. And Ole wouldn't put him. I don't think Ole would put himself in the main events, but he put himself in the main events because he drew money.
Yeah.
If you draw the money, that's great.
There's a great poster with Ole and Gene going to be in Greenville, South Carolina. I forget who they're getting. I think it was Paul Jones and Wally McDaniel. You can imagine what that kind of what that match was going to be.
Yes. What is causing all this?
Our love for old school wrestling. That's what the cause is.
That's right. We do love old school wrestling. Hello, everyone. Victor Nash, rest in peace, Ole Anderson. Jeremy Richter. Hello from Texas. Cheers to the original Rock. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize, but he was the original Rock. Let's see. Arkey Berdando, yo. I'm not for sure who that is. But yo back to you. Let's see. Kevin Pinley. Who were the bookers when you wrestled full time, Jack?
Bob Armstrong. Gosh, I'm trying to remember at those companies.
Well, Bill Dundee was there at one time.
Yeah, Bill Dundee. And I've told that great story of first night where I had to get approval because Bill was the new booker, and I had to go in, and his gun slides out of his bag and right up between my legs, and I looked up at him, and I said, "Are you shooting on me?" And I believe my humor got the job for me more than anything. And then, I worked independence the entire time too. So, there's more bookers than I could ever name. Of course, my favorite booker was me.
Okay, here is yo guy, our R Key. He's well, if I can read this. He said, "I love the WWF, WCW, and ECW."
There's something to love about all of those.
Yeah. Well, when you look back, I was a fan of the WWF until sometime in the '90s, and then I liked the Attitude Era. But then after that, from 2000 on, I have not been a fan of WWF. It's too much of a repetitive style wrestling.
And I will hand it to ECW. It was not my style, but I did watch the shows, and I love the way that they carved out their own piece of professional wrestling and made it unique and different. Did it draw everywhere? No, it didn't. But they knew that the majority of the places that they did stick to, they made money. Now, Paul wasn't real good about writing checks, but...
Victor Nash, Ole. Let's see if I get that. Ole Anderson is the one who discovered Road Warrior Animal before he was Paul Aaron Hawk. Yeah, he brought him in. He looked like the Village people. He looked like one of the parts of the Village people.
Yeah.
He comes in. He wrestles for about a week. He goes to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I believe that's where it was. And he decides that that's the night he was going. It was at Chattanooga that he shot the bird in?
No, that was on television.
Television, okay. Shoots a bird on television, gets the fight.
Walks in front of Gordon at the set, turns to the camera, and then lets it rip, and then was fired. They let him work. I mean, he was able to work, and he was gone maybe 3 weeks, and he was able to come back.
Yeah, he didn't stay there long.
Yeah, that was very dumb.
Evidently, him and Franklin Hayes got together and decided shooting birds was a good thing to do within that. And that was before it was fashionable to shoot a bird. Okay, that did not go over well with the promoters back then. Tyrone Spivey, sad today as part of the glory days are gone. One of my earliest matches I went was Wrestling 1 and 2 against Ole and Gene Anderson. Yeah, that was another one for the World Tag Team Championship in a Sunday afternoon. And
did he say it where? What town was it, Tyrone?
The Macon Coliseum.
Macon Coliseum.
Macon Coliseum. That's where he's talking about. Michael Barr, is everything you have messed up, Brent? Most of the time, yes. And I don't know what happened. Things will be working great. I've done some videos on my computer, on my mic just the other day. They worked, and now they don't work at all. So, Jimmy James, yes, Ole did pass away. Jimmy James, he did pass. He was 81 years old. Brian Lewis is with us. Brian Lewis, good evening, guys. Keep up the great work. Rest in peace, Ole Anderson. Michael Barr. Ole will, man, I couldn't get that. Ole will surely be missed as one of the best old school kayfabe heel wrestlers.
And let's not forget now, when Ole worked heel, babyface, he really got over too.
Well, he was believable in that particular way, too. Jimmy James said, I'm not going to put this up there, but he said he was so salty. Thought the last, I'm not for sure what that means. I'm not for sure what that, I can't read. I don't know what that says, so I'm going to move on through there because I'm not, Jimmy, I don't know. It says, God bless his friends and family, but I'm not for sure what that says right there. So I'm gonna move past that. Maybe Jimmy, you
said that he was past. He thought he was past the age
of
100.
Oh, he thought he was past 100. Okay, now I see. All right, I get it now, but I didn't really know what that would mean. And I've learned not to read something if I don't know what it means because I've read stuff on it before.
He thought he was 100. He was only 81.
Yeah, he was only 81. Hello, all. I forgot to introduce myself. Michael Barr, he didn't introduce himself. Let's see. Tyrone Spivey. I'm so honored to witness one of the greatest tag teams ever. Yes, truly we lost a legend. And that, we did. And those people who listened to what wrestlers said about Ole, Ole, without a doubt, sold out arenas everywhere he went, booked some magnificent stuff, just one of the greatest people in professional wrestling. And yes, he was the boss and people didn't like him. People don't say nothing bad about Jim Barnett. You know why? Because he was never there.
That's right.
People say bad stuff about Dad. But he was the guy that if you were going to get fired, a lot of times he was the hatchet man. He got to be the one that fired you. Not that he wanted to do it, but that's just part of it. Let's see. Hello all. First time tuning into your show. Shoo, I said shoo. Oh man. Grew up with the USWA. World Class Championship Wrestling, WCW, and the WWF. All great wrestling companies.
Had a full plate there, no doubt.
Yes. And good to have you on here. Thank you so much for being a part of Pro Wrestling Inside and Out. Let's see. Ole said something about Eric Bischoff, which prompted Blackjack Mulligan to knock him out.
Yeah, that was at the training school.
You know what? This is what gets me, though. Why would Blackjack Mulligan care about what was said about Eric Bischoff?
I think he was just thinking he was protecting his job there.
Didn't he get fired soon after?
Yes, he did.
That's what I thought. I don't think they would allow them to punch somebody out anyway.
Well, and that was the thing. I think Blackjack was thinking, well, if I defend Eric's honor, I'll have a job. But the whole atmosphere had changed by then, and you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Well, then there's no way of protecting Eric's honor.
That too.
Michael Barr. Let's see. He asked the question, where was Jim Barnett from? I think he was from the wasn't he from the northern area? Because he was one of the first to ever put a TV in a TV station to do it on I think the Dumont network, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Jim Barnett goes way. He would go way back into to probably the 50s.
Yeah, we have covered matches where he was in Texas, different parts of the country, wrestling before he ever started promoting.
Jim Barnett. This is the thing about Jim Barnett is he went to Australia and he spent, I don't know, how many years did he own Australia, Rodney?
For a while. I mean, I don't know, all through the 70s, I think.
So he was in Australia. He owned the wrestling, and he came in 1974. He sold his percentage, I think, to the Fullers, the Welches, and I think he hot-shotted it for the last 6 months he was there. True, and made a ton of money. And he came to Atlanta because he was the one during the War of Atlanta that changed the scope of it. I think Jim Barnett was a negotiator, and he negotiated Ann Gunkel and she got a great deal.
He put enough zeros on that check.
Yeah.
But no, and that's you're right. He was there maybe maybe in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. He ran there.
Yeah. And in Australia, but he did sell the territory, from what I read, to the Welches, and the Welches sold it to some other person.
Gary Hart and Lou Thesz in their books talk extensively about Australia, working with him, how they loved it, how he was so good to everybody, paid well, treated them well, and allowed the wives to come if they wanted to. Now, not a lot of the boys did that because they didn't want to worry about having their wives around. It put a kink in their after-match pleasures.
They didn't want their girlfriend to find out.
But
all right, let's see here. Jack, what's your thoughts on Ole's business relationship with Kevin Sullivan?
I don't really know behind the scenes how they got along with stuff. I know that Kevin's style and Ole's was very different. And I don't, I think Kevin was more willing to adapt to the changing styles, which maybe if they had kept Ole there in power, we wouldn't see a whole lot of difference. I believe WCW would still be alive if they would have listened to him.
You know what? What's so sad though is with Kevin is mostly Jim Barnett liked him. I don't know why. He must not have been watching his matches because he.
Well, and I've talked to Kevin quite a bit over the years, and he's never said a bad word about Ole.
No. Richard Hood, Danny Hodge broke Ole's ribs.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Danny Hodge was also a boxer. Brian Lewis talked about Buddy Landell. Buddy Landell had his head slammed to the jeans head. There you go, from Brian Lewis.
They must have done that multiple times.
Jeremy Richter. Why didn't Ole's son get more traction in the mid-90s?
He wasn't any good.
I liked Ole. I liked Brian. But he was going to have the same problem that promoter sons were going to have. They just wasn't going to give him a chance. He was probably one of the, as far as amateur wrestlers, but he just wasn't. They wasn't going to give him a chance.
Well, he didn't really have the personality.
No, he didn't have Ole's personality.
No,
but I think now he's an attorney. So I like you, Brian. You're a great guy. just in case you don't like what I'm saying. Let's see. He was a nice guy though. Nice kid. Brad Anderson, Gene's son, was a great guy too.
Yeah.
But for some reason, they had something. It's like any other sons. They missed, like the Armstrongs were good, but they just the Armstrong kids. But they just didn't have what Bob had.
It's funny because Brian Road Dogg had the personality.
Yeah.
He didn't have quite the skill level, but now you can't take nothing away from him. He's made more money than any of them, really.
Yeah.
Brad had all the in ring. He could cut interviews, but he just didn't care to if he didn't have to.
I think he really just wanted to be on the cards. I don't think Brad really wanted to be.
Brad told me many times, he said, man, if I can go on first and go, it'd make me happy. And that's what I'd do, you know.
That's what he said. He told me one time, he said, listen, I just want to wrestle. I don't really want to be in the main events.
Yeah.
He said, if I don't have to be in the main events, put me on the third, fourth match. Let me have a good match with somebody, and I'm happy. I'm happy. He said, if I can do this until the time I retire, and he probably would have if those guys wouldn't have run him over in the parking lot, messed his knees up.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean to. It was a joke, but I don't know if you need to be playing with cars and stuff.
No.
Only took on Sugar Bear Harris in Southeastern.
Yep.
I didn't know he did that.
Yeah. That whole Southeastern, a lot of those shows are on YouTube, so check it out.
Brian said, correction, Buddy was the partner of Ray Stevens on the night in question. Daniel Lang, Brent's right. It was Mid-Atlantic. Ray said he wasn't going to end up all messed up like Gene. I guess he said, I don't want to be sitting in the corner doing that. Yeah, you think wrestlers could? You think about? Do you think they could? You think they would get upset for the interviews that were done against wrestlers back then? Because they really, really would tell it like it was, and the guy would just have to go, "Man, did he really say that about me?" And they'd come back out and they'd do their interview and they'd say something about him. It's a little different. Any idea where Ole began wrestling? Minnesota. Vern Gagne trained him. You know what's funny? Because I don't think Ole ever went back there, ever. He never went to wrestle there. He never went to do anything. I'm knocking stuff off.
And it wasn't because he didn't like Vern. He had respect for a handful of people, and Vern was one of them.
Victor Nash said, Rodney, your mic is low. I don't think his mic is working either. We've had some kind of mic issues. Somewhere down the line, we had some kind of gremlins get into the microphones. Because mine ain't working and his wasn't working. I'm on another mic on that's part of the...
I'm beginning to think maybe it's possibly the jack that I hook it into. It's fine.
Don't blame me.
Well, you were able to hear that. There you go.
Jeff Mann, I think is what... when did Ole retire? I seem to recall him wrestling in late as 1991. I would say right after that.
Yeah.
He did go and do some stuff with Smoky Mountain Wrestling and Bryant for a short time. But again, I don't think for some reason he didn't do it all. He didn't do it long. Michael Barr, good. Let's see. Good hunters always eat when they shoot. Oh, you meant the other style of shooting. Cause of death. I think Ole did he not have dementia?
I don't think it was exact dementia, but it was something along those lines. But he was still aware, of who he was and who people were. I think he had, memory issues certainly, but not just full blown dementia. I don't think.
Now he had Parkinson's disease as well, or some.
Yeah, MS. He had
MS, because he's been in a wheelchair since we know since 2006 or 2008, somewhere around there. Thomas said, "Ole never jobbed for me." Yeah, he did. Ole got beat by so many people.
And because he was trying to build, he understood the importance of building new guys or even established guys. He knew that the matches didn't mean nothing if they weren't built up to mean something.
Yeah. Hey, right on television, TBS, Mike Davis beats him right smack in the middle of the ring on TBS. And now I'm gonna be honest with you. Me and Rodney asked this question. We asked Dad, "What in the crap did Ole get beat by Mike Davis for?"
Well, Mike had a pretty good run in Florida doing the Dusty Rhodes impersonation. And I think that was what Ole thought he could get out of him, but that didn't last long, unfortunately. And I loved Mike.
Yeah. One of the best angles in wrestling was when Ole turned on Dusty in the Omni. Walt said, "I love the show, guys. I am from Louisville, Kentucky. Could you please talk more about wrestling from there if you're familiar with it?" Yes. Hey, if you haven't seen our last video, we talked about Memphis wrestling from January 1980. I think when you go to our Facebook page, I don't know how that actually works. I don't know that I've actually went to it, but the featured thing, it's on wherever the featured thing is. And I guess that's at the top of the page. Just go to that, and we talked about January 1980.
Last week we talked about wrestling Memphis.
Yes,
and that was the show in Louisville was actually the ones that we were reviewing actually.
Yes, Dennis Mitchell. What was your memory when in 1976 Ole Anderson got stabbed by the 86-year-old farmer in North Carolina? Well, what memories about that? Peggy Lathan saved Ole's life that night. Yeah, we had heard about it, but that's sad. That was sad, though.
Yeah, he went and got sewed up and went to work.
Yeah. I think he worked the very next night.
He still worked. Yeah, he went and got sewed up, and he was working. And
now Ole was working both territories at the time. During that time, he was working Georgia and working the Carolinas. You got to say, here's two promoters, Jim Crockett and Jim Barnett, both wanted to use him as booker. So that's really something else. And wanted him on the cards because they knew they were going to draw money with him. But we don't have too many memories of that. We wasn't in North Carolina, but we do remember when he got stabbed, though. Over a lot of bad stuff about Ole Anderson. The thing is, he made his dream and he witnessed wrestling the way it was in Georgia. Without him, rest in peace. And that's true, Walt. We are having audio problems. Michael Barr, was Australia wrestling as good as American wrestling?
Yes.
Well, it was mostly Americans.
Yes, you would recognize it. Would recognize it. Check it up.
There are videos on YouTube. Just look them up. Yeah,
you'll see Mark Lewin. You'll see Mario. What is his name? I forgot his name now. That was terrible. You would see Abdullah the Butcher. You would see the spoiler, Gary Hart. Thunderbolt Patterson's there. The people in Australia love Thunderbolt Patterson. The who's who of wrestling went through Australia.
Yeah, Bill Dundee said Thunderbolt Patterson was over in Australia. Daniel Lang, Barnett. Let's see if I can throw this up here. Barnett went to Australia in the mid-'60s after he lost the Detroit and Indianapolis territory. Kayla says, hello. Hey, guys. Let's see. Richard Hood. How did Bob Armstrong and Ole Anderson get along? I think pretty good.
Yeah.
He used him as assistant booker twice, maybe three times. When they started running the Ohio tours, Bob Armstrong was assistant booker for maybe over a year, maybe longer than that. Ole trusted them enough to do that. So,
but they got rid of now we will say this: Ole had to get rid of Bob because Bob was too hard on the guys.
Yeah, that's what they said.
They kept crying.
Yeah, because he would get them to him. No, Bob was a harsh booker too.
Yeah, he could be.
Bob was different than Robert and Ron was. Bob pretty well took care of everything within the show. Where Robert and Ron would let other guys take care of their finishes, Bob not so much. Richard Hood, he went back to Georgia in 1970. Let's see, Ole couldn't get in the. Let's see. Ole couldn't get in the ref because he'd beat up people for real. There could be a truth there. Just no issues with the mic. I am a bad heel, Michael Barr said. Four Horsemen were the best. I never saw him lose in WCW. He didn't really wrestle that much by the time it was WCW, did he?
No, not
Wasn't he
much
managing
later.
mostly while he was booking? I mean, once he quit booking, he was gone.
Well, it depends on that. There was a World Championship Wrestling. He had to specify which World Championship Wrestling he's talking about. If you're talking about World Championship Wrestling, which is when Georgia changed its name, because
Oh, okay.
it never went as it never did go as WCW. It didn't go to WCW until Turner bought it.
Ole hurt himself bad when he fell off his roof. Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And that was the start of all his problems. I don't know why Ole had money. Why didn't he? You know, there were for a while, Ole was doing some type of deal where he'd buy houses. And Dad wouldn't work for him for a while. And I can't remember the deal, but he would buy houses, and Dad worked for him for a while. I don't know what he did. I can't remember what Dad did for him. But he would buy houses, and he had like a real estate company for a while. So maybe
selling houses, it was a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
For people who couldn't afford to, didn't have the good credit, so he was able to help them get financing for a house.
Yeah, it was a good deal. I couldn't remember the details of it though. Let's see. What southeastern Rodney you mentioned were Ole and those workers? It was actually in Tennessee, Knoxville. There was Michael. I don't know. There were two parts of Southeastern. There was a Tennessee version of Southeastern, and there was a Pensacola version of Southeastern. For a long time, there were two of them, and then Jim Barnett bought the Knoxville end. Ron Fuller went over to the Pensacola end, and I would say Ron ended up with a better deal out of that. Because really,
Knoxville was dead. Knoxville was dead.
Yeah.
I think dead's being nice about it.
Yeah. Thunderbolt first met Ole in the 60s while Ole was in the Army. Wow. You know, they kept in touch with each other. I think Thunderbolt almost called him once a week. All right, let's look at the guesses of who you think that was. I'm going to say Fritz von Erich. Do y'all remember who the people were?
Yes, I do. It was Bob Orton Sr. It was Dr. Jerry Graham. Fritz von Erich was the other one, and I can't remember the third one.
Well, I'm going to say it's Fritz.
I'm going to say it was Dr. Jerry.
I'm going with Jerry.
And I have no clue. You're going with who?
I'm going with Jerry Graham as well.
All right, so let us know.
And Richard had his guess. His guess was he was up there. Let me find it.
Bob was a good heel, as well as a face. Yes, he was. Bob said he had the most fun he ever had during that year when he was a bad guy.
It is more fun being a heel.
He said the problem was, though, is people hated him so badly in Dothan he couldn't even find a motel room there. That when he would walk into the thing to get a motel room, they tell him no, they was not going to give him a hotel room. He said he had to go all the way into Montgomery, Alabama, just to get a room because people off that TV, anywhere that TV hit, especially when he slapped Charlie Platt in the face on television, when he did that, people hated him so badly they would not even rent him a room. So he said I had to drive to Montgomery and then had to drive all the way back because people hated my guts in Dothan, Alabama. But he did such a great job at that. But he knew what he was doing. On TBS, he didn't wrestle a lot. No, he did. He did. When it really became World Championship Wrestling, and they were going to Ohio, I don't know that Ole wrestled many times on television at all. No, I just don't remember.
He was there. I think he and Piper wrestled once. He and Stan Hansen, him and Gene wrestled a few times on there. But then again, at the same time, Ole was booking the Carolinas and Georgia at the same time.
Yeah, great program tonight. Rest in peace, Ole. Thanks, Jack, Brent, and Rodney, and all the viewers. Brent, Ole went back to the AW in the early 70s. I believe he tagged with Ox Baker. That's where he come up with the thing that Ox Baker.
Yeah, with those mutton chops. That's where he came up with that, yeah.
Ole came into Georgia in 1974. I don't think he booked, though, until 1976, did he? Richard Hood said Bob Orton Sr. So he thinks it is.
Yeah, without Daniel says.
All three of you were right last week, and this week all three of you are wrong. Orton was the correct answer, and way to go, Richard. All right, guys. Ole Anderson. There's no doubt we lost. We definitely lost one of the greats in wrestling. He was probably. I want to go down as probably one of the most believable wrestlers of all time. And there were a lot of them, but you got it. You believed everything he did. You believed everything he said. Jack, your final comments.
Uh, Ole was just such a huge force in our industry, and deservedly so. We've said maybe he wasn't the nicest guy at times. Didn't matter, because if Ole could saw something in you, he would build you, and in that process, he would make you money. And if anybody ever wanted to complain about Ole, I don't get it. I don't get it. He was honest. Sure, he kicked a lot of guys to the curb, but they had it coming.
Yeah.
So we're going to miss Ole with the stuff that we have coming up. We're going to honor him by doing things the way that we were taught to do, by him, by your dad. We're going to try to continue his legacy.
Yeah. Rodney, final comments.
Well, not only that, we've talked about his wrestling career, but when you have to remember, Ole was doing the booking and coordinating when Georgia Championship Wrestling hit the satellite, went to cable. And he really, and Georgia Championship Wrestling, and along with Ole, set the standard for wrestling all over the country. And with that, as an innovator in wrestling. And as he had said before, that if they had pay-per-view back in 78, 79, that we would have been making millions of dollars. And I absolutely agree with that. I think they would have. But yeah, Ole Anderson is just not. He was a great wrestler, but he also set a standard of excellence, in my opinion, and something that's going to be missed for sure.
Yes. All right, folks, we want to thank you so much for being a part of Pro Wrestling Inside and Out. We definitely will miss Ole Anderson. And as far as my life goes, we saw Ole from 1974, 1975, and got to even talk and be friends with him throughout the years. And Ole Anderson will be missed. We'll see you next week right here on Pro Wrestling